I know I'm really late with this, but nevertheless I really wanted to talk about it. Berserk chapter 359. This is first chapter after almost a year without Griffith, thanks God, and this is a chapter where we finally go back to Alfheim and finally again see Guts and Casca. And this chapter starts with a haircut, a surprise but a welcome one as it turns out, because now Casca finally got her old look, and it is very touching moment for all Berserk fans because it is very we all remember Golden Age now and good old Band of the Hawk times and everything. So after that, chapter goes as most people expected, like with Casca meeting everybody that she never officially met really. And other than Guts, I honestly was most interesting in her interactions with Farnese this chapter, and this chapter did not disappoint because this whole panel and with Farnese crying, it was very moving moment, as even this elf queen later states, because Farnese really she was for most of her life she was only this problem for her family, unwanted property, and Casca saying thank you to her and that she was useful in some way. It is very, I feel very emotional for Farnese, and as later Isidro states, she's not very used to praise, and that really kind of summarize one part of Farnese's character. And as much as I like that part of the chapter, other interactions for me weren't very interesting. Like her interactions with Shirke, very formal, very boring. Isidro, for me, her interactions with Isidro are very predictable. Like, will you be my sparring partner? At this point, Isidro for me is kind of typical shonen character. Like, he reminds me if you put Naruto in Berserk. But I hope that one day Miura will find a way to make his character more interesting. One part of the chapter was obviously Casca sparring with these Vikings, and yeah, Vikings. The thing is, Miura is not very it is not unusual for him to put real life cultures in his world, so I really don't have big problem with this. Just the way they kind of Vikings, it is kind of funny, I guess. It is kind of self-aware, I guess. And seeing Casca fight again, it is very, very cool. I especially like her face while she's fighting. She looks so focused, her eyes are just these gray circles. It is very cool, and everybody's impressed with her skill and everything. And what I find really cool with this is, at the end of this fight, she's kind of, you see the sweat on her, and you see her heavy breathing, so you kind of see yeah, she's very good, but it is kind of hard for her after 2 years. She must practice a bit. That is for me what this panel really shows. And Isidro, as I said, asks her to be her sparring partner, and now everybody separates, and finally the most interesting part of the chapter arrives, because we realize that for the whole time of this chapter Guts was there, but behind this tree, just listening to Casca's voice and her interacting with other people after so many years. As this elf queen states, now she has her sanity again, so will she face eclipse or not? It is up to her. But what we learn later is really devastating, and how we actually arrive to that moment that I'm talking about. Farnese is kind of she has this dilemma, because she's the one who put this scared part of Casca back in her body, she's the one that pushed Casca back in reality again, although that part of her really didn't want to go there. So now she goes to Casca, tells her that Guts is behind this tree, and this is one of the obviously most beautiful panels of this whole chapter, Guts and Casca on the other sides of this tree. And it really reminds you of the Dream of Bonfire segment from the Golden Age. But it is very beautiful, just looking Guts as this just giant black figure, and Casca with this elf outfit. It is very, very nice picture. And she goes on telling Guts that everything, that he has good friends, that talking about how back in the old days he would never take a student, talking about Isidro. And for me, this is very interesting, how Casca is just casually speaking, but what you really want to see is them interacting, really talking with one another, but sadly that won't happen for a very long time, as we get one of the most, I would say, devastating Berserk moments that are not like some giant tragedies or something like that, because as Casca proceeds to talk, she says that judo reminds her, that Isidro reminds her of judo, and that's when everything breaks, because the name of judo suddenly triggers the memory of Eclipse, and we get this panel, and this panel I simply love, because for the most part, like, we got a lot of these panels with Guts, but this is the only time somebody else from the Eclipse, that somebody else in this in whole manga got some memory of the Eclipse, some traumatic memory. Like, we got a lot of panels with Guts' head and like these memories, but this is the first time we see this from the sane Casca's perspective, and she falls to the ground. Like, just seeing her face here is very like unnerving for me, like just her falling to the ground, and then the Guts turns because he's obviously scared for her, and this happens. Like, Guts basically became a trigger for the Eclipse memory for Casca. Like, Judo's name like maybe made her collapse to the ground, but her looking at Guts simply like triggers it to the point where she just go unconscious, completely unconscious. For me, this is what for me is really devastating in this whole chapter. Like, Casca's like this eye that is complete horror, and Guts' face, like you really see that, like, his despair beyond belief. Like, I would like to see more of Guts' expression in this when this happens, honestly. For me, this panel is not enough, but it really, like, this phase really summarizes how he feels about it. Like, he's in complete like despair that everything, like all his adventures, all his suffering were not enough. Casca will still not be able to see him without screaming. And this panel as well is one of the most beautiful of this whole chapter. Like, Guts just walking away. It kind of reminds me after his fight with Griffith when he left the Band of the Hawk. I really don't know what to say else about this whole situation. Like, I'm not really sure how they will fix Casca and what will happen. And the next panel is the ending of this whole chapter, and this is Skull Knight coming back again. And it is really raises a lot of questions, like what will happen to Casca, obviously, and Guts, will they meet each other again under the normal circumstances. But like, Skull Knight coming back, I guess next chapter he'll go and talk with Guts, explain to him what happened in last time Skull Knight saw Griffith, like what is this astral transformation. But I'm kind of interested, will this time Guts split with the group, or does maybe Skull Knight have some way to restore Casca's memory? I'm not sure, but like, we'll see in, I hope, couple of months. Like, you really never know it with Miura. Nevertheless, this chapter was something we all for a very long time wanted to see, and I just hope like the next one is not like a year away from now. So yeah, I hope you have a good day. See you next time. Bye.